Thank you very much, Artem, and thank you for having me here. And I'm sorry not to be here with you live. So yeah, today I wanted to talk to you about projecting purpose with story and this idea of using this skill set to rally people in tough times. I just wanted to kick off with this quote, which I like very much, because it sets story as something that's actually quite hard-edged. And I feel that we sometimes when we use the word story and storytelling, people assume that it's a very soft skill, that it's a gentle thing. And I don't think that's true. I think it's an absolutely fundamental technology and actually a very hard-edged skill that leaders need to master. And it is very much the role of a chief storytelling officer to help leaders to do that. I want to talk a little bit about the science of storytelling, not in any great detail because a lot of you will know it, but I wanted to pick out just a few of the elements that I find most compelling that perhaps hammer home this idea that storytelling really is a very hard-edged, fundamental thing that needs to be learned. It's not a nice to have. And the evolutionary context perhaps is the thing that jumps out at me in the sense that storytelling is a skill that we've always used as human beings, that is embedded so deeply in our evolutionary history. And fundamentally, it was something that we used to convey important survival information to each other. So when the information was vital and it was crucial to our survival, to our health and prosperity, this was the technology we used. This was the structural communication technology that we used to communicate it. And this quote from Lisa Cron always does it for me. It's crucial to our evolution, more so than opposable thumbs. The thumbs let us hang on, but it's story that tells us what to hang on to. And I'm reminded by one of my very first jobs, which was working on a sailing boat. And I was underskilled, definitely underskilled for that role, and about to embark on a voyage across an ocean. And I remember the skipper of the boat taking a few of us more inexperienced people aside and taking us to a pub and telling us a little story about one of his own first voyages across an ocean, which had ended with a capsize, very dramatic capsize, and him in the pitch black scrabbling in an upturned boat looking for an escape hatch. And I still remember him now looking at us and saying, the thing is, lads, you don't want to die in the dark. You're going to have to look after your own safety out there. And the reason that he couldn't find the escape hatch in that scenario was because he'd never bothered looking for it when the boat was the right side up. So it is this idea of telling a story, a dramatic moment that actually indicates that somebody has moved through challenge and has an important lesson to teach you. And of course, in evolutionary terms, the idea that stories are a network and a glue that enables human beings to actually cooperate together effectively. And you think of the nation state or religions, your teams, your families, they all exist on a bed of shared stories that you all understand and know very well. And that's, again, not a nice to have. That is the thing that allows us to cooperate together in large groups and the thing that's absolutely key to our evolutionary success. The psychology element of the science of storytelling that I wanted to pick out is the thing that perhaps I wish I'd understood before I worked in foreign affairs. And some of you may know Jonathan Haidt, who writes a lot about the negative effects of social media of young people. And he uses this wonderful analogy, I think, of an elephant with a rider on top of it. Well, the elephant is your emotional, reactive mind, and the rider being your logical, rational, analytical mind. And the simple truth is that the elephant is more powerful. The elephant will go charging off in a direction. And then what the rider does next is it seeks the data to support the direction of the elephant, not to challenge it. And I think if I'd understood that, then a lot of foreign affairs and indeed any human decision making would have made a lot more sense to me. Some of you may have had the opportunity to argue with a conspiracy theorist in your life. And that's perhaps an extreme example of the effect of that. But the fact is that stories, because they initiate emotional response, speak to the elephant. And they're just a crucial part of influencing people to do things that they're not already doing. And finally, Well, just use this quote from Antonio Damasio, and indeed from Jonathan Haidt. Your brain is set up to process stories more than it is to set up to process logic. This quote was doing the rounds on LinkedIn, as it does every few months or so, and I like it very much. It doesn't matter how educated, doesn't matter how clever you are, we're still in that state where we can't quite believe that data doesn't persuade. And actually, the truth is that you need to combine those two things. The magic influence package is data plus emotion. And finally, the neurochemistry of storytelling, all based around the work of Paul Zak, some of you will know. But if we initiate this cocktail of chemicals, cortisol, stress, oxytocin, togetherness, collaboration, and dopamine anticipation of reward, then we create this incredibly powerful cocktail that makes people suggestible, that allows them to accept our data and to trust and to follow us. So it's core leadership concept to understand that through effective storytelling, we can inject this cocktail of drugs into people's minds to smooth the path, particularly in tough times. So what is it that people need in difficult times when they need strong leadership, when they need leadership they can trust? It is really around this idea of trust. What are the components of trust? I would say, particularly in difficult moments, they need clarity. They need a leader to project and to deliver clarity of mission, evidence of their judgment and their competence. But allied to that, there must be warmth. There must be some sort of sense of emotional connection and caring. And you put those two things together, and you wrap it in a sense of authenticity, the details of your life as a leader, then you have a really, I would say, seemingly magical combination of a package that delivers trust. And perhaps that also adds up to charisma. And I've seen this in action in the political sphere, but also in the business sphere as well. Leaders who can deliver clarity with warmth, wrapped in the authentic details of their life, have a I would say nearly magic effect. So I want to talk about two different approaches to using story skills to deliver this clarity, to deliver this warmth, and indeed authenticity, to project trust in difficult times. One is rooted in personal storytelling, examples, moments of challenge from your life, where you have this opportunity to transmit that warmth, that empathy, competence, experience, but crucially, as a leader, to transmit the fact that you have moved through challenge, you have moved through difficult times, you understand what that means, and you've come out, whether successful or not, you have come out more experienced and with a greater sense of wisdom. That's evidence from the past. The second approach, which I would call more strategic storytelling, which is using exactly that same structural process of building a story to tell to put your plan, your strategy into a purposeful future story, giving people hope, clarity, and stability that you have a plan for what happens next. It's your vision of the future. And all of it is aimed through this structural technique of developing this cocktail of neurochemicals in people's minds that adds up to trust and makes it more likely that they will follow you, accept your data, and trust you to deliver. All of it is rooted in universal story structure, something that is cross-cultural and sits beneath culture, I would say. All human cultures have a similar structural approach to storytelling, even if the details of those stories are very, very different. And you can use many different models. Here's the one that I like. Here's the one that I kind of developed with my clients and that works for me. But there are many others, and you are free to use the one that works best for you. They are all very similar. And it's all around challenge. It's about people, characters moving through challenge struggling with it, and in some way resolving it, whether that's positively or indeed negatively. And then dividing that very simple structure into beats. Why does that matter? Because it really helps you deliver with clarity those chemicals. If you hit the beats, you will generate the chemical cocktail that you need to deliver message and be influential. So to break it down very quickly for you, stories are about a character or a group of characters who in some way have a relatable emotional connection to the audience. And you can do that many different ways. It might be with vulnerability, appropriate levels of vulnerability, demonstration of your competence, your skill set, your values, to whom then something happens which disrupts their status quo. And this is where you get the first injection of cortisol into your audience's system. But the thing that has happened that upsets the status quo presents them with a goal, something they must achieve, they want or need, and toward which they must struggle. And that struggle can be physical, emotional, intellectual, spiritual, or ideally a combination of all those things, until they reach the crisis point, the prospect of defeat, a point at which you have to make really tough decisions to move forward. We're going to come back to the idea of crisis and the importance of that. And I don't think there's anywhere that this concept is more important than when you're trying to rally your people through tough times. Crisis and the cortisol that goes with it leads inevitably to transformation. And this is where you can lay out a plan, how you're going to change yourself, how you're going to change the world around you to look for new solutions, maybe accept assistance from the world around to reach your goal, whether you succeed or you fail, leading inevitably to the resolution moment where you've really learned something about yourself, about the world around you, and you're in a position to perform better next time. And all of these beats are designed and aimed and based on our evolutionary history, evolutionary past, to generate these chemical cocktails that adds up to influence. Okay, I want to show a little video. Steve Jobs, it may seem a bit of a cliche to use Steve Jobs, but he is a very good storyteller, even if he's not a wonderful presenter or a deliverer of stories. He really understood on a structural basis how they work. And I want to show us he's talking about a tough time in his life. And I think this is absolutely crucial for a leader. If you are you or your organization, your nation, whatever it may be, is going through a tough time, you need to demonstrate that you as a leader have been there before. So if we could tee up that video and have a watch.
My second story is about love and loss. I was lucky. I found what I loved to do early in life. Woz and I started Apple in my parents' garage when I was 20. We worked hard, and in 10 years, Apple had grown from just the two of us in a garage into a $2 billion company with over 4,000 employees. We just released our finest creation, the Macintosh, a year earlier, and I just turned 30. And then I got fired. How can you get fired from a company you started? Well, as Apple grew, we hired someone who I thought was very talented to run the company with me. And for the first year or so, things went well. But then our visions of the future began to diverge, and eventually we had a falling out. When we did, our board of directors sided with him. And so at 30, I was out, and very publicly out. What had been the focus of my entire adult life was gone, and it was devastating. I really didn't know what to do for a few months. I felt that I had let the previous generation of entrepreneurs down, that I had dropped the baton as it was being passed to me. I met with David Packard and Bob Noyce and tried to apologize for screwing up so badly. I was a very public failure, and I even thought about running away from the Valley. But something slowly began to dawn on me. I still loved what I did. The turn of events at Apple had not changed that one bit. I'd been rejected, but I was still in love. And so I decided to start over. I didn't see it then, but it turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. It freed me to enter one of the most creative periods of my life. During the next 5 years, I started a company named Next, another company named Pixar, and fell in love with an amazing woman who would become my wife. Pixar went on to create the world's first computer animated feature film, Toy Story, and is now the most successful animation studio in the world. In a remarkable turn of events, Apple bought Next, and I returned to Apple, and the technology we developed at Next is at the heart of Apple's current renaissance. And Lorene and I have a wonderful family together. I'm pretty sure none of this would have happened if I hadn't been fired from Apple. It was awful tasting medicine, but I guess the patient needed it. Sometimes life's going to hit you in the head with a brick. Don't lose faith.
One of the things I like very much about that is that he's not a brilliant performer. He reads the speech, but it is a great story. It's a really nicely structured story. And let's just very quickly look at what that structure is. Here's how it breaks down. We've got Steve Jobs at 30 years old, clear character. He connects with us, with the audience, with a little display of vulnerability because he's lucky to have found what he loved, but also evidence of skill, success, and competence. Worked hard. He's managed to grow a $2 billion company, but then he gets fired. This is the incident moment. And at 30, he was out, a devastating blow, leading him with a challenge to find a new focus for his life, to make progress amidst this defeat. And he has to struggle. He didn't know what to do. He feels like he's let a generation down. He tries to apologize, and leading to this crisis moment where he thinks of himself as a very public failure, and crucially, he thinks about running away from the valley. Defeat. He looks defeat in the face. Crisis leads inevitably to transformation, but he rediscovers the love for what he did. He replaces heaviness with lightness and gives himself the freedom to start over. This event gives him the freedom to start over, leading to very great success, starting Next, starting Pixar. Pixar, of course, a storytelling juggernaut, falls in love, returns to Apple with new innovation, and indeed takes the company back. Leading to that resolution, clear message, sometimes life hits you in the head with a brick. You must not lose face. You must keep going. And I think that's a very effective leadership story for tough times. Exactly the sort of thing that I work on with some of my clients. Everybody needs to understand, as a leader, if they are to follow you, that you have experienced tough times and that you've come through them successfully. And if not successfully, then at least with more wisdom. So personal leadership storytelling, this idea of evidence from the past, does not have to be complicated. You tell people about a time that you faced some sort of challenge, you use descriptive detail, and you tell it in a structured way. And that is a start point, an easy start point for anybody to start creating those stories that really do mean something and will impact your audience. And starts that process of building trust in your competence, your judgment, and your experience. So that's approach one. That's personal storytelling. That's looking in the past, evidence from the past that you've got what it takes to lead people through tough times. And the second approach, now you've done the past, is to cover off the future, converting your plan, your strategy into a future story. And by doing that, real projection of clarity and stability, and we hope faith in your leadership in the future. And this from a recent article in the Financial Times. It's not about being a wonderful deliverer of rhetoric. It's not about being the most educated person in the room, but it is about setting out a vision and a direction that others can follow. And we see this in the political sphere, maybe particularly at the moment, the importance of being able to set out real vision. And because this thing we call story, this structural form of communication, is embedded in all our minds, it's not only how we process the past, it's also about how we predict and explain the future. So you are pushing it an open door when you set your strategy into this form. I just want to use the example of Napoleon Bonaparte, right? One of the great leaders of the 19th century, 18th and 19th century. And he was asked, and this quote is attributed to him, how do battles work? How do your battles work? And this is what he said: a dramatic action, that has its commencements, its middle, and its end. The order of battle taken by the two armies and the first movements to come to action constitute the prelude. The counter movements by the attacked army form the plot, which causes new dispositions, brings on the crisis, from whence springs the result. And of course, what he's talking about, he's explaining something in story form. The two armies are the character. The first movements to action are the incident. The counter movements are the struggle. The crisis, unsurprisingly perhaps, is the crisis, and the result, the climax. This idea of the future looking like a story is absolutely embedded in our minds, all minds, and always has been. We're hardwired for it. So to present a future vision in storytelling terms, you use exactly the same structure. There's really no difference. The same beats and the same attempt to initiate those chemicals in your audience's mind. You must define who we are: nation, state, team, company, organization, family, cultural group, whatever it may be. Define who you are and what positive qualities you have, your values, your skills, integrity, working hard, competence. And by doing that, you are generating this first stirrings of oxytocin. But the world has changed and requires us to react in some way. We inject our cortisol. What's our goal? What challenge must we face? This is where we set out the path ahead, what we need to achieve success, and identify the problems, identify the forces of antagonism that we're going to have to deal with. They might be internal to your organization, they might be external, they might be in the industry, they might be geopolitical, but starting to talk about the sort of problems you must face in reaching your goal. And then crucially, identifying the crisis point. And I'm going to come back to this theme a little later, but really being clear about what it is that could defeat you and what failure looks like. And this is where I see organizations shy away from looking at potential defeat and what the stakes are, and crucially, what hard decisions must be made. Crisis leads inevitably to transformation. And while humans hate change, they love this idea of transformation, what we're going to do to succeed. And this is where you as a leader, you lay out the elements of your plan, following hard decision, how you're going to change yourself and the world around you to achieve success. Our climax, sunlit uplands, what the prize is, what the world is going to look like when we win this thing. And that leads inevitably to the resolution. And in that resolution moment, because you will have laid out your plan in this form, you have built the chemical cocktail, you ask people for their support. You tell them what you need from them, your call to action. What are we going to do next? What do I need from you to make this vision a reality? And if you project your vision, your strategy in this format, you're injecting purpose, real clarity of purpose. You're injecting causality, momentum, and if you do it right, maybe even a sense of inevitability, because yes, all human beings understand, well, this is how the future works. Yeah, it works in story form. And to use a little bit of Aristotle, again, it may seem like a massive cliche to reference Aristotle, but there is an important difference between an event happening because of another event or simply after it. By using this progression, this story structure, you are injecting a sense of causality. One thing must naturally follow another. So I want to give you a little political example of this. And whenever I use political examples, I'm also always super clear to indicate that I'm not indicating any support for a politician, for one brand of politics over another brand of politics. I'm purely looking at communication skills, and I can use examples from across the political spectrum, left to right, and across different political systems entirely. I'm purely looking at this from the context of whether somebody is effective at their communication. So I want to just show you, the speech itself is about 15-20 minutes long, so I'm not going to show you the full speech, but just break down. This is Jacinda Ardern, Prime Minister of New Zealand, who was the Prime Minister of New Zealand during the COVID pandemic. And in 2020, she had to make a very hard speech to the people of New Zealand to indicate they were moving to the very highest level of lockdown restrictions, which was going to require from them some very, as we will all remember, require some very serious actions and restrictions. She defined the character as all New Zealanders. She built connection, again, through vulnerability, the idea that they were facing a devastating impact from COVID. She indicated clearly that the world had changed. 102 cases, the trajectory of transmission is clear, leaving them with a challenge to contain this virus, prevent the worst, through which they were going to have to struggle. And they were already involved in that struggle. They already had restrictions on their movements, social distancing, isolation, closed schools, and having to find new ways of working. And then crucially, she went to the crisis point. Here we are, facing the greatest loss of life in our history. And we have a very stark choice ahead. We have to act now. The big hit of cortisol before moving to the transformation, which is where you lay out your plan. And her plan was very serious lockdowns, level 4 lockdown measures, contact tracing, slowing transmission. And then she foreshadowed the climactic moment. We will save thousands of lives. And in time, we will be able to ease these restrictions. And having delivered that strategy in story form, she's free to move to the resolution. This is what I need from New Zealanders. I need you to follow the rules, to support each other. We are in this together. And it was a very effective and well received, insofar as difficult messages can be, or well received speech. I'm going to give you a commercial example. Tufan Ergin Bilgic, who took over as Chief Executive Officer of Rolls-Royce in 2023. Post-COVID, Rolls-Royce was on its knees, really. A lot of its problems had been exposed by the pandemic and the economic effects that followed the pandemic. And he was brought in to transform the business at a really difficult moment in the company's history. And he gave a town hall speech to all the staff, and it followed exactly the same format. Here we are, Rolls-Royce, 120 years of heritage, global family, skills, talents, but outplayed by our competitors. And again, that mix of vulnerability and skills and competencies, building connection amidst the group. COVID economic disruption has exposed our failure, but he is here to change that. And the challenge, very clear, we've got to save the company, and there's time urgency. Time urgency, a really useful technique to be able to throw in. People react, on the whole, very positively to time urgency. She identified the struggle they were facing, the lack of performance over the years, unsuccessful investments, and underperformance. And again, he did not shy away from the crisis moment. He said, I've talked to our investors. This is our last chance. We are standing on a burning platform. And really, that's the line that the speech came to be known by. We are standing on a burning platform. But if we examine our leadership in a harsh way, establish very granular strategic targets, performance culture of intensity, pace, and rigor, then we can transform this situation. We can reach the sunlit uplands to be, again, a competitive, growing business, winning together, doing great things, not just for ourselves, but also for the world. And what did he need from his people? Think different, act different, make a difference. Clear call to action in that resolution moment when he delivered his strategy in story form. Now, this was a very hard message and a very tough time for Rolls-Royce. And despite the harshness of the message, it was extraordinarily well received. And I think maybe many of us wish we had invested in Rolls-Royce at that point in its history. We would have done very well by now. So by doing it, by positing your strategy in story form, you make it very, very, very cohesive and coherent to the human mind. You're pushing at the open door because that structure is absolutely embedded in all humans. And from clutter, you create simplicity, harmony, and difficulty, you create opportunity. And that idea of difficulty is one that I just want to kind of come back to at the end. Leadership in tough times requires leaders to absolutely confront the anxieties of their people. And I think this quote from economist and diplomat John Kenneth Galbraith really hammers that home. And the problem that I see, I think, in lots of strategy communications from commercial organizations is an unwillingness to confront the difficult bit, the stakes, what happens if we fail. And I think it's a huge mistake. I can understand the reticence, absolutely. It feels very hard to talk to your people about that. But actually, the reaction of your people to the toughness and the difficulties ahead, I think, will surprise you. And that is why it's so important when you're putting together your vision of the future. You must not ignore the crisis. You must not in some way tag, what is it that could defeat us here? What does failure really look like? And crucially, what hard decisions need to be made? This is where I see leaders in commercial organizations shy away from that tough message. But the thing is, in the human mind, crisis leads inevitably to transformation, this wonderful thing. And this movement from cortisol to oxytocin really, I would say, is the heart of your story, your strategic story. And it is the thing that will drive people to follow you and to believe in you. Because all human beings know that life is struggle. And by doing this, by deconstructing your strategy, taking the data and fitting it into these strategic stages of story, you will not only make your story better, you'll also make your strategy better. And I see this with the people I work with, sitting down around a table, identifying the elements, putting them in different story stages. It's a wonderful tool for ensuring that your strategy does make sense and does have clarity. So it's a developmental tool as well as just a communication tool, and maybe even absolutely as powerful. Narrative strategy mapping, it doesn't have to be a difficult process. As I say, you just sit around a table, you ask yourself questions, sometimes tough questions, in each phase of story structure, whatever model you choose to use for that. And what you come out with is a real clarity of mind, and not only clarity of mind, but ability to communicate that clarity externally. So those are the two approaches that I would recommend for rallying people in tough times. One, take examples from your past where you have moved through challenge, construct them in story form, go and tell them. People will love you for it. Whether those stories are of success or of failure, they will love you and trust you because you have shared that with them. And secondly, present your vision of future in exactly the same form, structural form, that gives the human mind real clarity and real faith that you know how the world will unfold if people follow you and trust you. And by doing that, you move from competence, I would say, to inspiration. You become an inspirational leader. Move beyond just the ability to master data and master the facts. Thank you for listening to me. I'll just end with those words. Your story is power, and I hope you do use it well. I'm sure you do. I'm sorry not to be there in person again to answer questions here and now, but of course, I'm super happy. Please do get in touch, ask any questions, and all of that.
Peter, that was lovely. I especially loved the connection you did between the story structure. That was really clear, and the two examples in the later part of your speech. That was lovely. Quick question from myself. I can't hold from asking it. So you've discovered like two approaches, like you delivered them to us: personal storytelling and strategic storytelling. One is more of your life, and the other is more overall design of the speech. Quick question. Which parts of the strategic story would you advise people to use personal examples in? Like, which parts of this big formula are the best bits where you can say, that brings me to a specific moment in time, and go into a personal story?
I think that's an excellent question. And when I'm involved, particularly in speech writing with leaders, where they have tough messages to deliver and they need to rally people, I do advise to go with a personal story up front. Short, keep it tight. You've got to be quite ruthless about that. but it's absolutely key in terms of building connection. That idea of who are we, who am I, right at the beginning of your strategic story. So you're absolutely right. You weave these things together. But when you get to crisis moment, that's another great opportunity for a personal story. Here we are in our crisis moment. Let me tell you about another time when I had to face this. So depending on how much time you have, what the format is, whether it's a town hall, a speech, a one-on-one conversation, a presentation to a board, you have to be aware and clear about how much time you have. And but yeah, early, do it early is my advice.
Awesome, love it. And a quick second question here. You mentioned that one of the usual mistakes here is omitting the crises, going straight into the directive for action and call for action. What are some other mistakes that people make when delivering this strategic story and clarifying their strategy?
So I think there is a very understandable drive to just start with the transformation. Start, okay, folks, here's the goal. Here's how we're going to get there, and everything's going to be great when we get there. And that is so stripped down, it has no emotional context. You haven't defined who we are and why we matter. And if you just do that first, you just get a little bit of oxytocin going, you will change everything that comes next. And that's the idea of moving from just a data-based approach to a story-based approach. And that doesn't mean it has to take a long time. That's initial connection. You can do that in 30 seconds, but you mustn't omit it totally. And I think that constant drive to lead with data, here are our goals, here's how we're going to get there, here's what things are going to be like when we get there, is a mistake. Spend a minute, 30 seconds, just on some of this, more of this emotional context. And that doesn't have to be dumping your issues on the table as a leader. It means just tagging this important idea of who are we and why do we matter? Why are we a cohesive group? What are our positive qualities? Why are those positive qualities going to see us through this tough time? You'll change the room, I guarantee it. Change the atmosphere.
Love it. For me, it really connects deeply into, before asking people to make the decision, make sure you embrace the identity and help them embrace the identity that decides and helps them decide.
Because we are tribal beings, we are tribal animals, and we need that sense. We need that sense that we're part of something a bit bigger than us. And that's what drives people to do hard things. And the stakes, this crisis moment, that's what drives people to do hard things. And I do understand also that reticence about delivering hard message. No one really enjoys doing that. But the paradox is that is the thing that makes people do tough stuff. I had I worked for someone back in my government days who'd been in the military. And I just remember him telling me something, many years ago. He said, thing is, Pete, nobody goes into battle because of a pie chart, right? Nobody does tough stuff because the data says they should. People do tough stuff because they feel something. And it is a job of a leader, and therefore the job of their storytelling officer to access that power and to present the communications in that way. Build that feeling of togetherness.
I love it. Thank you so much. And thank you for guiding us through this beautiful structure that is really easy to grasp and use through personal example and more corporate examples. Thank you so much. That was amazing.
My pleasure. And as I said, you can use different structures. They're all at root the same thing, because we all believe in it, in the same structure.
Thank you so much for being with us in this recorded format, and I wish you can join us for at least some of the talks. Thank you so much once again.
Thank you.